This whole story starts in 2007 when Avatar: The Last Airbender came out. I loved that show with all of my heart. I still do love that show. Honestly, if everybody's, asking for something that, we can all enjoy to watch, that's my first pick. I'm looking for Avatar: The Last Airbender. So in that story, there is a guru that works with Aang, and his name is Guru Patik. And Guru Patik wants to help Aang achieve the Avatar state. And so what he does is he takes him through a chakra meditation. Now, at the time that I had first started watching Avatar: The Last Airbender, I was a full-fledged Mormon. I was probably, 2007, I would have been like, I don't know, 14 or 15 years old. And at the time, my dad was going through a lot. He had stopped going to church, and he was studying all kinds of stuff that I didn't understand. And little did I know that there was an intense amount of crossover between what he was going through and the types of spiritual, awakening type stuff that I was being exposed to in a children's show, right? I was watching Avatar: The Last Airbender, and I was learning about chakra meditation. So Guru Patik takes Aang through the steps of how to meditate and how to open his chakras. And they start with the root chakra and they go all the way up to the crown chakra. So fast forward, it's 2015. I have come home from my Mormon mission. I served in Kansas City. I served in Kansas and Missouri. And I had a friend that invited me to come and work with him in Kansas City after I returned home from my mission. And I was living in the Hegvig's house. I was living in their upstairs back room, and they were very good to me. Everything was really good, man. We were working hard. I was active in my young single adult church community. I was serving. I was working out a lot. I was in really great shape. My bills were low, and my money was high, and everything was really good. I don't know what possessed me to start meditating on my chakras, but I decided that I was going to start exploring my root chakra. And so I looked on YouTube and I looked on, I Googled a whole bunch of stuff to try to find out how to open your root chakra. And I wasn't really worried about it conflicting with any of my beliefs at the time. I just wanted to get in touch with this spiritual energy source. And so the first thing that I started doing was I found this video that somebody had compiled, and you can still look it up. I'll put a link to it. But it says how to open how to open your chakras as explained in a children's TV show. And what it does is it takes all of the scenes of Aang opening his chakras with Guru Patik, and it compiles them together and adds music. And so that's where I started. I started meditating on my chakras, and at first it was just sitting and relaxing, and all the forums and all the literature that I was reading said that the first step was to relax your body. And so I would sit in my room, either on a pillow or on my bed or even laying on the floor. There were several methodologies that I was taught where you actually stand up and you put your feet, you really focus on the connection that your feet have with the floor, and you flex your gooch, you flex the very bottom of your pelvic floor, and you send the energy up from that center into your spine, right? So you send it up into into the physiology that makes up the chain that goes from the root to your crown, to try and get the energy to start flowing in that direction. Thankfully, I had a lot of really excellent teachers that were online telling me how to get in touch with my root chakra and how to find this part of myself that I had never gotten in touch with. And so I learned to relax. And since that time, I've learned a bunch of really awesome relaxation techniques, but I learned to relax, and I would start at the top of my head, and I would relax the skin of my scalp. I would relax my neck. I would, they would encourage you to take your tongue off the roof of your mouth and relax your jaw, relax your eyes, relax your shoulders, relax your arms, relax your chest, relax the inside of your chest, all of the sinews and tissues and inside and connecting your chest to your heart. And so I would go down the body and I would relax and relax and relax. And for several weeks, I got into the habit of doing this every single day, several times a day, for sometimes as long as an hour. And I would relax, and then I learned how to relax my mind. I would find this void. And what I eventually learned to do was I would see thoughts come into kind of this stage, and it was this empty void stage, but I could see it in front of me, and most of the time it was people's faces. So I would think of my mom, and I would think of my friends, and I would think of my coworkers, and I would see their faces kind of dissolve into mist. And one by one, anytime that somebody or something came into my mind, I would relax and let their face or whatever that thought was fade into kind of the background of the stage of my mind. And pretty soon, what I would be able to do is I could relax my body and I could relax my mind, and I would end up in this void. And the only way that I can describe it is like the void that Eleven gets to in Stranger Things. When she's going into the sensory deprivation chamber, she's able to see kind of this open black, and it's not like that doesn't capture it the way that it really was in my mind, because it was nothing. It wasn't black, it wasn't dark, it wasn't empty, it was none of those things. It was without form, it was without description, and I was able to get there, and I could stay there for long periods of time, and I would just sit in those. And all of the experts would tell me to focus all of my energy on the base of my spine. And I'd focus on the base of my spine, and I would imagine this pool of spiraling energy in my body. I could feel the heat in the bottom of my spine. I could feel the blood flowing through that part of my body and up into my spine. And over time, I was able to get there so quickly. I could be sitting in my car and just be able to find this empty space. And I got really good at it, and everything was really, really just amazing. So fast forward, I'm probably, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks into doing this every single day for like an hour a day. I would come home from work and I would just meditate, and then I would go to sleep. I was ruthlessly dedicated to this whole idea, and I was journaling all the while, and so I have all of my notes meticulously documented, and I'm able to refer to those now. One day I opened my eyes, and I was able to find myself in this void. I was there. It was nothingness. I was nothing. I was thinking about nothing, but then all of a sudden I was there. So maybe it was transcendental meditation, and I was projecting my spirit into some ethereal realm. I don't know. But I opened my eyes and I looked around, and in front of me there was this small little point of orange light. And I focused all of my attention on it, and all of a sudden, almost like a sparkler, it started to light up. And then it kind of burst into this tiny little orange flame, no bigger than my fist. And I was looking at this flame, and I was really curious. I was absolutely astounded that I had created this thing. And then I reached out and I touched it. All of a sudden, it became this person in front of me. He was sitting crisscross, and he was all orange. He was ethereal, kind of translucent, but I could see him. He had form. It was a human being. I could tell that he was very tall, very well built. He was in a suit. He had a really nice watch on. Everything fit really nicely. He had amazing hair, a perfect jawline, and he had no face. He was this faceless orange man staring at me in the void. And without a mouth, and without his mouth moving, he looks at me and he says, "You will never be as successful as me." And I was shocked, right? All of a sudden there was this entity speaking to me in this formless void that I was able to find meditating on my root chakra. So I was looking at this character, and he would just keep saying that. Anytime that I tried to talk with him or ask him what was going on or who he was or what he was trying to explain to me, he just kept saying, "You will never be as successful as me." And so I would return to this void every day, and I would open my eyes, and there he would be, staring right back at me. And so I ignored him. I sat there and I continued to do my meditation. I tried to let him fade away from my awareness. And every time that I opened my eyes, there he was, and there I was in the void, and I could stay there for lots and lots of time. Probably 4 or 5 weeks in, I looked over to the right and there was a blue light. Exact same way. It burst into a little ethereal flame in front of me. I reached out and touched it, and it was my cousin, but he was 13 years old. And he didn't say anything to me. He was pudgy at the time. He had glasses. Back then, he would style his hair with this really glossy hair gel, and I could see him clear as day. And it's funny because I actually, months and months later, I went into this chest that I have of all of my pictures and memories. And I have a picture of him when he's 13. It was one of his school pictures, I'm guessing. And that was him. So my mind had called forth this version of my cousin. And I tried to talk with him. I tried to say things to him. And he was just smiling back at me. He wasn't, and he wasn't necessarily like, it didn't seem like he was looking at me. He was almost looking through me. And I just remember the feeling that I got when I looked at him was this feeling of disappointment from his parents. This feeling of, I let them down. I let my cousin down. I let our family down. I let myself down. And I wasn't acting in accordance with who I was supposed to be. Every day I would start my meditation and I would see these two entities. Another few days passed and a green light appeared, and I reached out and I touched it. And this one was a little bit different. It became 3 of my best friends from high school, and they weren't sitting there looking back at me. It was this constant recurring walking away. So they would appear, all 3 of them, and then they would walk away. And the feeling that I would get from them walking away was being left out. I could feel this deep dread of being left out of their plans, not going to a concert that they were going to because it was on Sunday and I wasn't allowed to go, not being able to stay out late because I had a curfew. And I had this deep feeling of missing out on things, and it was several times it made me cry. I was so distraught that I was in tears in my meditation. Shortly after that, a pink one appeared, and it was the form of an old girlfriend that I had. And she didn't say anything to me. She was just staring back at me. And she had actually broken up with me while I was on my mission. And so I never got closure from that relationship. It was very strange. We were like messaging each other back and forth on emails. And she was telling me that, some guy in her dormitory at college had, they had started dating, and she was, finally convinced that she wasn't going to wait for me anymore. And I had been out on my mission for 18 months. And I was so excited to come home, and I was planning on marrying this girl. And the feeling again, right, was so strong that I was not good enough, that I wasn't good enough for anybody to love me. And she would just, every time that I looked at her, I would have this dreadful feeling of not being enough, not being worthy of a person's love. The next one was a brown light. Kind of hard to explain, but it was this smoky, kind of like almost dirty brown light that I reached out and touched, and it was somebody that I'd never seen before. It was an entity that was created in my mind of what I can only assume was a homeless person. It was this man staring back at me, and he was sickly, he was skinny, he didn't have very good clothes on, his hair was all ragged, and he also did not say anything to me. Next was a black light, and the black light was kind of a faraway image of my dad in his office. I have a complicated but improving relationship with my dad, and at the time, I'd been away from my family, I'd been at college, I'd been on a mission, so I had kind of a far-off relationship with him, but it was kind of this like pinhole view of looking down at him from the office, just working away, toiling away. And I would knock on the glass, and he would say, "Hey, I can't talk right now." And I could see that scene unfolding in front of me every single time. It was this tiny little version of this view into this window of this memory and this feeling that I had of not wanting to end up like my dad. I didn't want to work in an office. The ironic part about that is I work in an office and I face the same way that he does, and I'm in a very similar chair at a similar desk. He doesn't work in that job anymore, but there he was as this ethereal entity in my chakra meditation vision. And bear in mind that every time that I entered the void and every time that I was able to meditate to this space, I would see all of these entities sitting around me in a circle. And then finally one day, a red light appeared. And I reached out and I touched it, and it was me. It was a version of me staring back at myself, glaring at me, angry, almost like happy that he was angry. It was the same age, it was the same clothes, he was looking right at me, and he was just angry with me. And I tried to talk with each of these entities. I tried to find out what it was that they were trying to tell me, and the red version of myself would yield nothing. He was always just staring, and he was always angry. I reached out to several people while I was doing these meditations, and I was trying to get spiritual guidance. And I was told on one of the forums to try and isolate these entities and have a conversation with them. And so one by one, I was able to do that. But the theme kept recurring where they would either repeat the same thing over and over, or they would give me the same feeling over and over. But I would explore the depths of those feelings, and I would find these very powerful, deep thoughts that I had locked away, or that I was avoiding, or that I didn't even know existed. And one by one, I started to have these feelings of resolution, because all of the advice that I was getting was that these were my fears. They were manifestations of all of the things that I was afraid of in my life and about myself. And so some of them were really easy to understand: not getting love, being abandoned by my friend, letting my family down, you know, being destitute, being homeless, not being successful. And the encouragement that I got, right, and the meditation guidance that Guru Patik gave to Aang was to let them flow down the creek, to feel them and to feel the opposite of them, and to resolve them in my own heart, and to rehearse in my mind the truth of what was going on, right? Basically, identify the feeling and to call it out and to speak to it, and then to articulate the reason why that feeling is not something that I should be afraid of, and that it's something that I can let go, where the fear is not serving me. Not necessarily to push away from me, but to let it flow down the creek, right? Basically to fold it into a little origami ship and let it flow down the creek forgotten. One by one, and some were a lot easier than others, right? Resolving the blue one, my cousin, was really easy. It was all rational mind. I was able to say, no, he's responsible for his own life. I'm responsible for my own life. Nobody's opinion of me matters, right? And what happened when I resolved each of these entities was they would shine very bright, and they would sit back in the lotus position, right? They were all sitting crisscross applesauce in this circle around me, and they would take on this humming, kind of chanting, I don't even know how to describe it. They would straighten their back, and they would kind of almost like a sound bowl was going off. I could feel the energy emanating from them in a very positive way. And every time that I went to them from that point moving forward, I would feel good about the situation or the person. I would feel resolved. And so one by one, I went through this exercise with each of these entities. And one by one, some of them took longer than others. Some of them were very difficult to try and resolve. Some of them I had lots of things that I had to journal about, and conversations that I had to have, tears that I had to shed. And I was able to get through each and every one of them, except for the red version. The red version wasn't giving me anything. I wasn't necessarily feeling anything, right? He wasn't giving me fear. I was almost embarrassed, right, at this angry version of me sitting back. And so I made a bunch of assumptions, and I tried to get to the bottom of what this guy was trying to teach me, right? What fear it was that I had staring back at myself. Why was I angry? Why was I looking at myself like this? And why couldn't I get him to say anything? He couldn't yield anything. He was this closed box. The red entity took months to resolve. All of the other chakra figures were resolved and sitting there, and occasionally I would go back to them and I would sit with them and I would commune with them about the feelings that I was having, and I would go deeper into each of those feelings, and they didn't change. They would continue to feel resolved. I would continue to feel the hum emanating from them, and I was constantly thrust back to this red version of me sitting there and looking back at me. And over the course of several months, while I was sitting on that floor in Kansas City, I would look at myself and I would say, what am I afraid of? What in me is causing this great fear? What is holding me back? What is locking up my root chakra? And finally, I started to rehearse all of the things, all of the episodes in my life where I had become angry at myself, angry at the world. And I'm an intense, passionate person, and I could find those episodes in my life where I had let anger get the better of me. And every single time that I did, every time that I got angry or that I made somebody feel less than themselves, or every time that I was hard on myself, or every time that I would let my intensity or my passion subjugate somebody or try to demean somebody, I could feel those feelings. And this version of myself would look back at me and I would feel it even deeper. And the fear that I had was this fear that my life, my entire existence, was just governed by fear, that I was going to be stuck, that I was going to be lost in this anger. I was afraid of my anger. I was afraid of this passion. It took a lot of journey. It took a lot of journaling. It took a lot of reading and study and therapeutic activities and exchange. It took a lot from me to try to resolve this. But one day I was sitting there and I finally just looked at myself and I said, that's not me anymore. I let that person go. I don't need that person. They're not there for me. They've never been there for me. They've only been there to make my life more difficult. And I was reminded in that moment of a conversation that my mother told me with one of my principals in elementary school, where he had said to my mom, he is going to struggle in his life because of the way that he is, meaning that something about me was holding me back. And I felt that feeling so profoundly, and I felt so frustrated, and I felt so embarrassed, and I felt so disappointed in myself. And I resolved in that moment that I wouldn't let that person control me, that I wouldn't let the past define me, that I wouldn't let my emotions define me, and that I could rise above those. And I looked at myself and I said, you don't control me. You are not me. I am so much more than this one-sided, angry version of myself. And all in an instant, the red version of me sat back and he had this content feeling. He had this content look on his face and he closed his eyes. And all of the lights around me, all of the people around me, they all of a sudden collapsed in on themselves and they became the flames that they first were before they touched them. And they all danced in this circle in front of me, and they coalesced into this one single ball of light. And that light shot up. It created this giant white pillar, and it shot up into the sky. And I remember looking up at it and seeing it go into eternity, into this void. And it was this giant column, like something out of a Halo movie, and I could see it flying through, and the energy coming from it was huge, and it lit up the void inside, and everything became this white light. And then I saw the light come down from the sky, and it shot into the top of it shot into the top of my head, right at the crown of my head, and it shot into my spine, and it filled my body with light, and everything in my body felt like it was going to be destroyed. All of the nerve endings in my body were filled with this power and this energy, and I felt like I was going to be destroyed. I was lifted off the ground, and I could feel my heart beating, and I could feel my skin pulling apart, and all of the energy in my body, all the blood in my body felt like it was boiling, and I was lifted off the ground, and feeling all of a sudden subsided. I was able to catch my breath, and all that energy, I could feel it in the base of my spine. And I felt this almost click, and the warmth in the bottom of my spine flowed into the rest of my body. And I felt completely safe. I felt safe. I felt warm. I felt comforted. I felt no anger. I felt no fear. In that moment, I had opened my root chakra. I had opened it in such a dramatic way. And I was 100% sober. At the time, I had nothing. I had never even touched a drink. I had never done any sort of psychedelic drug. I didn't even know about any of that stuff, but I felt this dramatic feeling, and it stayed with me to this day. Everything felt good. All that work, it took 6 months of meditating on my root chakra, and I was able to open it. And it flowed into my body, and I could feel the energy in all my other chakra centers. I could feel more experiences to come. And that's the story of me opening my root chakra. That was the most important experience of my life. And it has served as the catalyst for spiritualism for me. I thought that I had felt the spirit, right? Before that, I felt like I had enjoyed the fruits of the Holy Ghost, as the Mormons say. But this was unlike anything that I could have ever hoped to experience. And I hope that the story was enlightening for anybody who listens to it. And I hope that you will take it seriously and take this on your journey and do your best to find that void, to relax your body and to relax your mind and to just sit in that void and try and find your fears and let them flow down the creek. Thank you.